The grand hall of Buckingham Palace fell silent. Every eye turned toward the tall figure standing at the entrance. Prince William had just walked into the most important royal gathering of the year. Something was very wrong. His jaw was set. His eyes were cold. And when Queen Camilla rose from her seat, expecting the traditional bow of respect, William did not move. Not even an inch. The royal guards standing at attention actually froze mid-breath. One of them later said he felt his heart stop, because in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Before we continue with what happened next, if you love stories that show the real emotions behind royal walls, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what comes next. It had been 3 months since King Charles had fallen ill. The doctors called it a minor condition, something manageable. But the palace walls whispered different stories. Charles was weak. He was tired. And for the first time in his reign, he had needed to step back from his duties. That's when Camilla stepped forward. At first, it seemed natural. She was his wife. She was queen consort. It made sense for her to attend events in his place, to sign documents, to represent the crown. But slowly, something shifted. Camilla began making decisions, small ones at first, changing the schedule for a charity event, declining an invitation without consulting anyone, then bigger ones. She reassigned staff. She altered protocols that had existed for decades, and she did it all with a smile that never a word quite reached her eyes. William noticed immediately. He was at a private dinner when he first heard about it. One of the senior advisors, a man who had served the crown for 30 years, mentioned casually that Camilla had dismissed 2 of the king's most trusted aides. Without his approval? William had asked, his fork stopping halfway to his mouth. The advisor hesitated, then nodded. William set down his fork. He didn't finish his meal that night. Over the following weeks, he watched. And what he saw made his blood run cold. Camilla wasn't just filling in for Charles. She was replacing him. She held meetings without him. She made policy suggestions to Parliament. She even began redecorating the king's private study, removing his father's photographs. His mother's paintings? It was as if she was erasing him piece by piece. William tried to speak to his father about it, but Charles was too tired, too worn down. "She's only trying to help," he said weakly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." But William knew better. He had seen this before. Years ago, with his mother, the memory came back to him in flashes, his mother's sad eyes. The way she had been pushed aside, made to feel small in her own life. He remembered the whispers, the coldness, the way the institution had chosen sides, and now it was happening again. But this time, William wasn't a child. This time, he could do something about it. The day of the ceremony arrived. It was meant to be a formal gathering, nothing dramatic. Just a standard royal event where the family would present awards to distinguished citizens. Camilla had insisted on hosting it. Even though Charles was still unwell, William arrived exactly on time. He wore his military uniform, every medal perfectly placed. His face was calm, but those who knew him could see the storm behind his eyes. When he entered the hall, the room stood. Protocol demanded it, and then Camilla rose from her seat at the head of the table. The king's seat, she smiled. That same smile, and she waited for him to bow. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. The grand hall of Buckingham Palace fell silent. Every eye turned toward the tall figure standing at the entrance. Prince William had just walked into the most important royal gathering of the year. Something was very wrong. His jaw was set. His eyes were cold. And when Queen Camilla rose from her seat, expecting the traditional bow of respect, William did not move. Not even an inch. The royal guards standing at attention actually froze mid-breath. One of them later said he felt his heart stop, because in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Before we continue with what happened next, if you love stories that show the real emotions behind royal walls, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what comes next. It had been 3 months since King Charles had fallen ill. The doctors called it a minor condition, something manageable. But the palace walls whispered different stories. Charles was weak. He was tired. And for the first time in his reign, he had needed to step back from his duties. That's when Camilla stepped forward. At first, it seemed natural. She was his wife. She was queen consort. It made sense for her to attend events in his place, to sign documents, to represent the crown. But slowly, something shifted. Camilla began making decisions, small ones at first. Changing the schedule for a charity event, declining an invitation without consulting anyone. Then bigger ones. She reassigned staff. She altered protocols that had existed for decades, and she did it all with a smile that never a word quite reached her eyes. William noticed immediately. He was at a private dinner when he first heard about it. One of the senior advisors, a man who had served the crown for 30 years, mentioned casually that Camilla had dismissed 2 of the king's most trusted aides. Without his approval? William had asked, his fork stopping halfway to his mouth. The advisor hesitated, then nodded. William set down his fork. He didn't finish his meal that night. Over the following weeks, he watched. And what he saw made his blood run cold. Camilla wasn't just filling in for Charles. She was replacing him. She held meetings without him. She made policy suggestions to Parliament. She even began redecorating the king's private study, removing his father's photographs. His mother's paintings? It was as if she was erasing him piece by piece. William tried to speak to his father about it, but Charles was too tired, too worn down. "She's only trying to help," he said weakly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." But William knew better. He had seen this before. Years ago, with his mother, the memory came back to him in flashes, his mother's sad eyes. The way she had been pushed aside, made to feel small in her own life. He remembered the whispers, the coldness, the way the institution had chosen sides, and now it was happening again. But this time, William wasn't a child. This time, he could do something about it. The day of the ceremony arrived. It was meant to be a formal gathering, nothing dramatic. Just a standard royal event where the family would present awards to distinguished citizens. Camilla had insisted on hosting it. Even though Charles was still unwell, William arrived exactly on time. He wore his military uniform. Every medal perfectly placed. His face was calm, but those who knew him could see the storm behind his eyes. When he entered the hall, the room stood. Protocol demanded it. And then Camilla rose from her seat at the head of the table. The king's seat, she smiled. That same smile, and she waited for him to bow. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. William stood perfectly still, his eyes locked onto Camilla's. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. The silence grew so heavy that one of the guests later said it felt like being underwater. Camilla's smile flickered. Just for a moment, but William saw it. "Your Majesty?" someone whispered from the side, trying to prompt him. William didn't acknowledge them. Instead, he spoke, his voice clear and steady. "Where's my father?" The question cut through the room like a blade. Camilla's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened on the back of the chair. "The king is resting, as you well know." "He asked me to. I didn't ask what he asked you to do," William interrupted. His tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I asked where he is." Nervous cough echoed from somewhere in the back. Camilla straightened her shoulders. "Prince William, this is neither the time nor the place, for he should be here." William took a step forward, not threatening, just deliberate. "This ceremony was scheduled weeks ago. My father confirmed his attendance personally, and now he's absent, and you're sitting in his chair." The words landed like stones in still water. One of the older royals, a duchess, actually gasped. No one spoke to the queen this way. Not publicly. Not ever. But William wasn't finished. "I want to see him," he said. "Right now." Camilla's jaw tightened. For the first time, the mask slipped completely. "You're being disrespectful, am I?" William's eyes never left hers. "Or am I being a son who cares about his father's well-being?" The two of them stood facing each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Camilla spoke, her voice low and sharp. "Your father is fine. He's simply tired." The doctors have advised rest, and I'll hear that from the doctors myself. William, I want to see my father. Now, the standoff could have lasted forever, but then something unexpected happened. Princess Anne stood up. She was sitting 3 seats away, and until that moment, she had been watching in silence. Anne was known for staying out of drama, for following protocol without question. But now she stood, her face unreadable. I agree with William, she said quietly. Every head in the room turned toward her. I haven't seen Charles in 4 days, Anne continued, and every time I've asked to visit I've been told he's unavailable. She looked directly at Camilla. I'm his sister. I think I have a right to see him. Camilla's face went pale. Before she could respond, another voice joined in. I haven't seen him either. It was Prince Edward. He stood slowly, his expression troubled. 5 days for me, he added. And when I called, I was told he was too weak to come to the phone. The room erupted in whispers. William felt something shift in his chest. He had thought he was alone in this, but he wasn't. Camilla looked around, and for the first time, William saw something new in her expression. Fear. This is absurd, she said, her voice rising slightly. You're all overreacting. Charles is simply, then prove it, William said. The words stopped her cold. Prove it, he repeated. Take us to him right now. Let us see for ourselves that he's fine. Camilla opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, she nodded. But it was the kind of nod that came with defeat. Fine, she said tightly. Follow me. William's heart began to pound as they walked through the palace corridors. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. Anne walked beside him, her face grim. Edward was just behind them. A small group of concerned family. Members and advisors followed at a distance. Camilla led them to the king's private wing section of the palace. That was usually off limits even to family without permission. 2 guards stood outside the main door. Open it, Camilla ordered. The guards exchanged glances. One of them hesitated. I said open it, Camilla repeated, her voice sharp. The guard unlocked the door, and what William saw when he stepped inside made his blood turn to ice. The room was dark. Heavy curtains blocked out all natural light. The air smelled stale, like no one had opened a window in days. And there, in a large chair by the window, sat King Charles. But he wasn't the man William remembered. His father looked thin, too thin. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes were open, but they seemed distant, unfocused. Father? William's voice cracked. Charles turned his head slowly, as if even that small movement required effort. William, he said quietly. His voice was barely a whisper. William rushed to his side, kneeling down. What's happened to you? Charles blinked slowly. I'm just tired, son. Just tired. But William knew better. This wasn't just exhaustion. He turned to look at Camilla, who stood in the doorway, her face carefully blank. How long has he been like this? William demanded. The doctor said how long? Camilla's silence was answer enough. Anne pushed past her, moving to Charles's other side. Her face went white when she saw him up close. My God, she whispered. Charles, when did you last eat? The king didn't answer. William stood up slowly, his fists clenched at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. What have you done to him? Camilla's face hardened. I've done nothing but care for him, she said coldly. While all of you were busy with your own lives, I was here. I was the one making sure he had everything he needed. Everything he needed? Anne's voice shook with anger. He looks like he's been locked away. Don't be dramatic. Look at him. Anne shouted, and everyone in the hallway froze. Princess Anne never shouted. He can barely keep his eyes open. When did a doctor last examine him? Camilla hesitated. Yesterday morning. I want their report, William said immediately. Now you have no authority too. I'm the heir to the throne. William cut her off, his voice like steel. And if my father is incapacitated, that makes me next in line to make decisions about his care. So I'll ask you again. I want the doctor's report. Now. For a long moment, Camilla just stared at him. Then she turned on her heel and walked out. The sound of her footsteps echoed down the hall, like gunshots. William immediately turned back to his father. He pulled back the curtains, flooding the room with afternoon light. Charles winced and raised a weak hand to shield his eyes. "Sorry, father," William said gently, "but you need light. You need air." He opened the windows. Fresh air rushed in, and William watched as his father took a deep, shuddering breath. "How long have you been in this room?" William asked softly. Charles looked confused. I'm not sure. A few days? Maybe. Maybe longer. Have you been eating?" "She brings me soup. Sometimes. Anne's voice was sharp. "Charles, you need to eat properly." "You need, I know," Charles said, and suddenly he sounded very old and very tired. "I know, but I couldn't." "She said the doctors wanted me to rest." William felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry wouldn't help his father now. "We're going to get you proper care," he said firmly. "Real doctors. And you're not staying in this room anymore." Charles nodded weakly, and William saw tears forming in his father's eyes. "I'm sorry," Charles whispered. "I should have been stronger. I should have." "This isn't your fault," William said, gripping his father's hand. "None of this is your fault." Footsteps approached from the hallway. Camilla returned, holding a folder. Her expression was unreadable. "The medical reports," she said, handing it to William. He took it and began reading. His expression darkened with every line. The reports were vague, too vague. They mentioned exhaustion and stress, but no specific diagnoses. No treatment plans. No recommendations beyond rest and isolation. The last report was dated 5 days ago. "These aren't real medical reports," William said slowly, looking up at Camilla. "These are barely more than notes. The doctor?" "Which doctor?" Anne demanded. "Who's been treating him?" Camilla hesitated again. "Dr. Morrison." William's blood ran cold. Dr. Morrison was not the king's regular physician. He was someone Camilla had brought in from her own private staff, a man known for being flexible with his professional opinions. "He replaced his actual doctor," William said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I did no such thing. Where is Dr. Hendricks? Where is the man who's been treating my father for 20 years? Camilla's silence spoke volumes. William stood up slowly. When he spoke again, his voice carried through the entire room. "I want Dr. Hendricks here within the hour. I want a full medical team. And I want security to make sure no one enters or leaves this room without my explicit permission." He turned to the guards who had followed them in. "That includes her." Camilla's face flushed red. "You can't do this." "I'm the queen, you're the queen consort," William corrected her. "And right now the king is in no condition to make decisions. Which means according to the protocols you love so much, those decisions fall to me." "The Regency Act requires formal declaration," William finished, "which we'll be pursuing immediately. Until then, I'm acting in my father's best interests. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to take it up with Parliament." Camilla looked around the room, searching for support. But every face she saw was either neutral or hostile. Even the staff members, who had once smiled at her, now looked away. She had pushed too far, and everyone knew it. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "No," William agreed. "It's not. Because we're going to find out exactly what's been happening here. Every meeting you've held, every decision you've made, every person you've dismissed or replaced, all of it." Camilla's jaw clenched. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. William let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Anne put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, did I?" William looked back at his father, who seemed to be drifting off to sleep now that the confrontation was over. "I just declared war on the Queen of England." "You protected your father," Anne said firmly. "That's all that matters." But William knew it wasn't that simple. Because Camilla didn't just have a title. She had connections, allies, people who owed her favors, and she would use every single one of them within 2 hours. Dr. Hendricks arrived. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s, with graying hair and concerned eyes. When he saw the king's condition, his expression went from concern to horrified. "Your Majesty," he breathed, rushing to Charles's side. "What on earth? Just help him," William said quietly. "Please." Dr. Hendricks worked quickly, checking vital signs, asking questions, making notes. The longer he worked, the deeper his frown became. Finally, he stood up and gestured for William to step aside. "He's severely dehydrated," Dr. Hendricks said quietly. "Malnourished. His blood pressure is dangerously low. And based on what I'm seeing, I'd say he's been given some kind of sedative." Regularly, William felt his world tilt. Sedative. Something to keep him calm. Docile. Dr. Hendricks looked grim. In small doses, it would just make him sleepy. But if given daily, over weeks, it would explain why he's so weak. So confused. "Are you saying someone drugged him?" "I'm saying someone gave him medication that wasn't medically necessary, whether that was intentional or not." Dr. Hendricks trailed off meaningfully. William closed his eyes. This was worse than he thought. Far worse. Because if what Dr. Hendricks was suggesting was true, then Camilla hadn't just been overstepping her bounds. She'd been systematically incapacitating the king, and the question that haunted William as he stood there, watching his father sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, was simple. Why? The answer came 3 days later. William was in his office, reviewing documents, when his private secretary knocked urgently on the door. Double quote, "Sir, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet. On the screen was a draft documentan official proposal that had been submitted to Parliament that very morning. William read it once, then read it again, unable to believe what he was seeing. It was a formal request to amend the Regency Act. The proposal argued that given the king's prolonged illness and uncertain recovery, it would be in the nation's best interest to allow the Queen Consort to serve as regent, rather than waiting for the Prince of Wales to assume the role. The document was detailed, professional, convincing, and it had been drafted weeks ago, long before Charles had become this ill. William's hands shook as he set down the tablet. "She planned this," he said quietly. "All of it." His secretary nodded grimly. "There's more, sir. I've been making inquiries discreetly. Dr. Morrison, the physician she brought in, he has a history. 3 years ago, he lost his license to practice in Scotland after questions arose about how he treated an elderly patient." "What kind of questions?" "The family claimed he was overprescribing sedatives to keep the patient manageable, making them easier to control." William felt sick. "The license was reinstated after an appeal," his secretary continued. "But the allegations were never fully investigated. And 6 months after that, he joined Queen Camilla's private medical staff." Everything was clicking into place now. The isolation, the sedatives, the vague medical reports. Camilla had been systematically weakening Charles, just making him dependent on her, making him seem unfit to rule. And once Parliament approved her as regent, she would have had all the power of the crown without anyone questioning her authority. It was brilliant, in a terrible way. And it had almost worked. "Get me the Attorney General," William said. "I want every member of the Privy Council contacted immediately. This ends today." But Camilla wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, as William prepared to meet with senior advisors, news broke across every major outlet in the country. The headline made his blood run cold. "Prince William stages palace. Coup. Concerns grow over treatment of ailing king." The article painted William as paranoid, power-hungry. It claimed he had forcibly removed the Queen from the king's side, that he was preventing Charles from receiving care, that his actions bordered on elder abuse. Anonymous palace sources expressed concern. Medical experts questioned his judgment. Political commentators debated whether he was fit to be heir. And at the center of it all was a photograph. William, standing over his father, his face dark with anger. The image had been taken out of context, but it looked damning. William's phone exploded with calls. His advisors panicked. Even some family members began to question whether he'd gone too far. Only Anne stood firm. "It's a smear campaign," she said flatly when she arrived at his office that night. She's using the press to turn this around on you. It's working, William said, staring at his phone. Half the country thinks I'm trying to steal the throne, and we tell the truth. You think they'll believe us? She's the queen. She's been playing the victim for years. The public loves her. Anne's expression was hard, and we give them proof they can't ignore. What proof? Dr. Hendricks has been running tests on Charles all day. Blood work, toxicology, everything. Anne leaned forward. If there are sedatives in his system, if there's evidence he was being drugged, that's not speculation. That's fact. William felt a spark of hope. How long until we have results? Tomorrow morning. And if the results show nothing, Anne met his eyes, then we're in trouble. That night, William couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his mother, about how she'd been treated, about how she'd tried to fight back against the institution and lost. He'd promised himself he would never let that happen again, not to anyone in his family. But now, he was in the same position she'd been in fighting, against powerful forces being painted as unstable, watching as the truth got buried under spin and lies. The difference was, he wasn't alone, and he wasn't backing down. At 6 a.m, Dr. Hendricks called. We have the results, he said. You were right. William's heart raced. What did you find? Traces of diazepam in his system. It's a sedative, commonly used for anxiety. But the levels we found suggest regular dosing over several weeks, possibly months. Can you prove it wasn't prescribed legitimately? Dr. Morrison's records show no prescription for diazepam. In fact, his notes specifically state the king was only receiving vitamins and mild supplements. Dr. Hendricks paused. Either his records are false, or someone was giving the king medication without documenting it. Would that hold up legally? As medical evidence? Absolutely. As proof of intent, Dr. Hendricks hesitated. That's trickier. We can prove Charles was given sedatives. We can prove it wasn't officially prescribed. But proving who gave it to him, and why. Leave that to me, William said. He made 3 calls. The first was to the Attorney General, sharing Dr. Hendricks's findings and formally requesting an investigation into the king's medical care. The second was to the head of palace security, instructing them to retrieve all surveillance footage from the king's private wing over the past month. The third was to his own press secretary. Prepare a statement, he said. We're going public with everything. The medical evidence, the surveillance, all of it. I want the British people to know exactly what happened here. Sir, are you sure? Once we release this, there's no going back, I'm sure. By noon, the palace released an official statement. It was careful, factual, but devastating. It detailed the king's condition when he was found. It included Dr. Hendricks's medical assessment. It noted the presence of unprescribed sedatives in his system. And it announced a formal investigation into potential misconduct. The statement didn't name Camilla directly, but it didn't have to. Within an hour, every news outlet in the world was covering the story. The tide of public opinion shifted instantly, and by evening, Camilla's own press team released a statement. Of their own, Queen Camilla has always acted in the best interests of the king and the nation. She strongly denies any wrongdoing and welcomes a full investigation to clear her name. But the damage was done. Because later that night, palace security delivered something to William's office. Flash drive containing security footage from the king's private rooms. And when William watched it, he saw everything he needed to see. Camilla, alone in Charles's room, crushing pills into his tea. Not once, dozens of times. William sat in the dark, watching the footage play over and over. Each clip was damning. There was Camilla, glancing toward the door before reaching into her pocket. There she was, crushing something white into powder. There she was, stirring it carefully into tea before handing the cup to Charles with a gentle smile. For your nerves, darling, he could imagine her saying. The doctor recommended it. And Charles, trusting his wife, would drink it without question. William felt something break inside him. This wasn't politics. This wasn't about power or succession. This was betrayal in its purest form. He closed his laptop and sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called. "Anne, I have it," he said quietly. "Video evidence. Clear as day." Anne was silent for a moment. "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? because William now held his stepmother's fate in his hands. He could release the footage and destroy her completely. Criminal charges, public disgrace, the end of everything she'd built, or he could use it as leverage. Force her to step back quietly, avoid the scandal, and protect the institution. His advisors would push for the latter. The palace always chose discretion over truth. But William thought of his father. Wasting away in that dark room, he thought of his mother, silenced and sidelined until she had nothing left, and he knew there was only one choice he could live with. "I'm releasing it," he said. "All of it. William, she needs to face consequences, Anne. Real ones. Not a quiet retirement and a generous pension. She poisoned the King of England. And if this destroys the monarchy's reputation, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed." Outside. "You sound like your mother," good William said. "She was right about a lot of things." The footage was released the next morning. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace demanding Camilla's arrest. Parliament convened an emergency session. The Attorney General announced a criminal investigation, and Camilla disappeared. Not literally. She was still in the palace, in her private apartments. But she stopped making statements, stopped appearing in public. Her lawyers released brief comments denying everything, but even they sounded uncertain, because how do you deny video evidence? William spent that day with his father. Charles was improving rapidly now that the sedatives were out of his system. His color was better. His eyes were clearer. He was eating solid food and walking short distances with assistance. But emotionally, he was shattered. "I trusted her," he said quietly as they sat together in the garden. "After everything. After Diana, after all the years of criticism, I thought I'd finally found someone who loved me." "I know, Father. Was any of it real?" Charles looked at William with hollow eyes. "Did she ever care about me at all? Or was I just a means to an end?" William didn't know how to answer that, because he'd been asking himself the same question. Had Camilla planned this from the start? Or had the power gradually corrupted her, turning genuine affection into ruthless ambition? Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the why was less important than the what. "You deserved better," William said simply. "You deserved honesty." Jules nodded slowly. Then he reached over and gripped William's hand. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me, for fighting when I couldn't." William felt tears prick his eyes, but he blinked them away. "You're my father," he said. "I'll always fight for you." Formal charges were filed. The Crown Prosecution Service announced that Camilla faced charges of administering a noxious substance with intent to harm, conspiracy to defraud, and misconduct in public office. If convicted, she could face years in prison. The trial would be historic. A queen in the dock. It would dominate headlines for months. But before any of that could happen, something unexpected occurred. Charles requested a private meeting with Camilla. William tried to talk him out of it. "Father, you don't owe her anything." "I know," Charles said quietly. "But I need to understand. I need to hear it from her." So the meeting was arranged. It took place in a neutral room, with security present but out of earshot. William wanted to be there, but Charles asked him to wait outside. "This is something I need to do alone," he said. So William waited in the corridor, pacing, imagining 1,000 different conversations happening beyond that closed door. 40 minutes later, Charles emerged. His face was calm, but sad, resigned. "What did she say?" William asked. Charles was quiet for a long moment. "She said she did it for us," he finally answered. "She said I was killing myself with work, with stress. She said the sedatives were meant to help me rest, to recover. She said she never meant for it to go so far. Do you believe her?" Charles looked at his son. "I believe that she believes it. I think she convinced herself she was acting out of love, that she was protecting me by drugging you, by trying to take over the throne, by controlling something she was afraid of losing." Charles shook his head. "She spent her whole life as the other woman, the one everyone hated. And when she finally became queen, she was terrified of losing that position. So she tried to make herself indispensable, irreplaceable. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, Charles agreed. It doesn't. But it helps me understand. And I think that's all I wanted. William studied his father's face. Are you going to ask them to drop the charges? No. Charles's voice was firm. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. But I needed to look her in the eye one more time, to see if there was anything left of the woman I married. And was there? Charles smiled sadly. I don't know, maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Put a hand on William's shoulder. But I do know this, you were right to stop her. You were right about all of it, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You trusted the wrong person. That's not your fault, isn't it? Charles looked away. I've spent my whole life trying to do the right thing, to serve, to be worthy of the crown. And I still ended up here, my wife facing criminal charges, my family torn apart, the monarchy's reputation in ruins. Then we rebuild, William said firmly. We do better. We'd be better. Charles met his son's eyes and saw something there that gave him hope. Strength, conviction, a determination to learn from past mistakes. You're going to be a great king one day, Charles said quietly. I learned from watching you, William replied. The good and the bad. And for the first time in weeks, Charles laughed. It wasn't much. Just a quiet chuckle. But it was real, and it was a start. 6 months passed. The trial became the most watched legal proceeding in British history. Every day, cameras captured crowds outside the courthouse. Every night, analysts debated the evidence on television. Camilla's defense team argued that she had acted out of concern, that the sedatives were suggested by Dr. Morrison as a legitimate treatment, that she had no criminal intent. But the prosecution had the video footage. They had Dr. Hendrix's testimony. They had the falsified medical records. And they had something else. Witnesses, staff members, who had been dismissed or silenced, came forward. They spoke about Camilla's controlling behavior, about how she monitored Charles's every interaction, about how she gradually isolated him from everyone who might question her. Authority. One former aide testified that Camilla had once said, Charles is too soft, too sentimental. Someone needs to make the hard decisions for him. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced Camilla to 4 years in prison, though she would likely serve less with good behavior. Her title of queen consort was formally revoked. All her royal privileges were stripped away. She would be released from prison as a private citizen, nothing more. When the verdict was announced, William was with his father at Sandringham. Charles had been recovering there, away from the chaos of London, rebuilding his strength and his spirit. They watched the news together in silence, as the judge read the sentence. But William saw his father's hand tighten on the armrest of his chair. Are you all right? William asked quietly. Charles was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I am, he said. Or I will be. That evening they walked together through the estate grounds. The autumn air was crisp, and leaves crunched beneath their feet. It was peaceful here. Quiet. I've been thinking about stepping down, Charles said suddenly. William stopped walking. What? Not permanently. Just ... temporarily. Under the Regency Act. Charles looked at his son. You've proven yourself more than capable, and I think I need time. Time to heal. Time to figure out who I am without. He didn't finish the sentence, but William understood. Without Camilla. Without the weight of the crown. Without the expectations and the pressure and the constant scrutiny. Take all the time you need, William said. I'll be here. I know you will. Charles smiled. That's why I can actually consider it. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Charles spoke again. Your mother would be proud of you. You know that, don't you? William felt emotion rise in his throat. I hope so. She always said you had her strength. Her sense of right and wrong. Charles's voice was thick with emotion. And she was right. You have her heart. The way you fought for me. That was pure Diana. I just did what needed to be done. No, Charles said firmly. You did what was right, even when it was hard. Even when it would have been easier to look away. That takes courage. He reached a small pond at the edge of the property. The water was still, reflecting the fading sunlight. "Do you regret it?" Charles asked quietly. "The way you handled everything? The scandal? The damage to the monarchy's reputation?" William thought about it carefully.
"I know,"
he finally said, "because the truth matters. And if the monarchy can't survive the truth, then maybe it doesn't deserve to survive." Charles looked at his son with something like wonder. "When did you become so wise?" "Around the same time, I realized I couldn't save everyone," William said, "but I could fight for the people I love." 3 months later, the regency was formalized. Charles remained king. But William assumed his duties while his father took time to recover physically and emotionally. It was an unusual arrangement. The public supported it. They'd seen what William had done for his father. They'd seen his strength, his integrity, his unwillingness to compromise his principles, and slowly, trust in the monarchy began to rebuild. William approached his new responsibilities with careful determination. He met with citizens from all walks of life. He addressed Parliament about mental health and elder care reform. He spoke openly about family, duty, and the importance of protecting vulnerable people when those people are royalty. And every week, he visited his father at Saint. Charles was getting better. Therapy helped. Time helped. Distance from the trauma helped, but there were still hard days. One afternoon, William found his father sitting alone in the library, staring at an old photograph. It was from Charles's coronation, he and Camilla, standing side by side, wearing their crowns. "Burning that might help," William suggested gently. Charles let out a bitter laugh. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, all the moments when I should have known something was wrong. You can't blame yourself for trusting someone you loved, can't I?" Charles set down the photo. "I made the same mistake twice. With Diana, I let the institution tell me what to do. With Camilla, I let my need for approval blind me. When do I start taking responsibility for my own failures?" William sat down beside his father. "You take responsibility by learning from them, by doing better, by being honest about what happened so others don't make the same mistakes." Charles looked at him. "Is that what you'll do? When you're king?" "I'll try," William said. "I'll probably fail sometimes. But I'll keep trying. That's all any of us can do." They sat together in comfortable silence. Father and son, two men trying to navigate the complicated legacy they'd inherited. 1 year after the trial, Charles made his first public appearance. It was at a charity event for elder abuse. Prevention, a cause he'd chosen. Deliberately and personally, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Charles spoke briefly, his voice strong and clear. He talked about vulnerability, about the importance of protecting those who can't protect themselves, about how abuse can happen anywhere, even in palaces. "I'm here today not as your king," he said, "but as a survivor. As someone who experienced firsthand what it means to lose control of your own life, and I want you to know it can happen to anyone. But it doesn't have to define you." Applause was thunderous. William watched from the side of the stage, his heart full. This was his father, not the man the crown had made him, but the man he'd always been underneath. Compassionate, vulnerable, human. After the event, as they drove back to the palace, Charles turned to William. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For that moment in the hall? When you refused to bow." Charles's eyes were bright. "That's when I knew. That's when I realized I wasn't alone anymore." William felt tears threatening, but held them back. "You were never alone, Father. I just needed you to see that." "I see it now," Charles said. "I see a lot of things now." As their car pulled through the palace gates, William looked out at the crowds that had gathered. Some held signs of support. Others just wanted to wave. These were their people, not subjects to be ruled over, but citizens to be served, and that's exactly what they would do years from now. Historians would debate what really happened during those tumultuous months. They'd analyze the evidence, the motives, the political implications. But for William, it would always be simple. He'd seen his father suffering, and he'd refused to look away. He'd seen injustice, and he'd refused to stay silent. He'd seen power being abused, and he'd fought back consequences. Be damned. Because that's what family does. That's what love demands. And when the day finally came that William would wear the crown himself, he would remember that moment in the Grand Hall, the moment he chose truth over protocol, the moment he chose his father over tradition, the moment he refused to bow, not out of disrespect, but out of the deepest respect imaginable, the kind that sees another person suffering and says, "Simply not on my watch." And that, more than any crown or title, would define the kind of king he would become, the kind who understood that real power isn't about commanding others to kneel. It's about being brave enough to stand up when everyone else is bowing, even when it costs you everything, especially then.